speak to Dan Perry, a former editor of the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He's also the publisher of Ask Questions Later on Substack. Dan Perry, thank you once again also for joining us. I want to ask you about the fact that on Saturday night, the Prime Minister's office said that Israel would only accept a comprehensive deal that secures the release of all hostages at once. But given that it's planned this massive takeover of Gaza, it's sort of hard to see that Netanyahu has any will to make a deal happen.
No, I actually think he does. And let me just state with great clarity, I'm not here to defend Netanyahu, and I'm not even sure anyone can explain exactly why he changes his statements from day to day. It's very clear that the conditions in Gaza are horrendous and need to be fixed. All of that is indisputable. But I do take issue with some of the reporting and the other guests on the show that speak of an Israeli desire to ethnically cleanse and occupy the entire Gaza Strip. I know different. I spend most of my time these days in Israel. I'm extremely familiar with the discourse in Israel. And there is near consensus in Israel that the goal is to return the hostages and to remove Hamas as a governing and military power in Gaza. And there are reasons for this that I don't think are opaque to the Arab countries, including to Qatar and certainly to Egypt. Hamas has brought nothing but devastation to the Palestinians and to the Gazans in particular, and is absolutely dedicated to eternal conflict with Israel. That's their goal. And the question is how to achieve the goal. And I don't rule out the current saber rattling and threats to enter Gaza City proper and to move the population south in order to weed out Hamas and then take out Hamas, that all of that is, to an extent, maybe not a bluff, but an effort to put pressure on Hamas to accede to the demands of the Arab League and to Egypt and to Qatar, which is to hand over power and to disarm. I think they're going to insist on that. And really, the only question is, what are the means to do it? I've recommended other means. I think they should do a deal, leave Hamas in power over the smoldering ashes of what's left of Gaza, and then explain very clearly that for reconstruction to happen, they need to disarm and leave. I think maybe then the population would force them to do this, and perhaps there would be infighting among Hamas. So yeah, I mean, if I was in charge, I'd end the war right now. I'm not so sure that Netanyahu will agree to do that for a lot of reasons. He may disagree with me. He also may fear for his coalition. We know that he's just that cynical. It's just a huge tragedy for the people of Gaza and well, for the people of Israel that this continues. But the way to end it now, and you would all be amazed, and a professor from Georgetown in Qatar would be astounded to discover that the war is over and there's no more genocide if Hamas disarmed and left. And I think, given that the Arab League has called for this should be the focus.
I mean, Dan, you say that this would be all over if Hamas was to disarm and leave. Hamas had been elected by Palestinians. Regardless of that, a blockade did exist in Gaza before this war happened. Israel was very much controlling what goes in and what goes out. I've been there myself. I've seen how it works before. But I just want to move on, Dan, to the Israeli cabinet overnight approving this next phase of its war on Gaza in preparation for its full takeover of Gaza City. What does that mean in the coming days? Because we're seeing that ground forces accompanied by the Air Force will be moving in towards these areas. What's your understanding from what you're hearing there in Israel in terms of what that actually means? What are we seeing? What's the strategy here?
Well, as I say, I don't rule out that this is more of a threat than an actual plan, but the plans do exist, and they may, in the end, if negotiations fail, actually come to fruition. But the military is going about it very slowly and with evident lack of enthusiasm. The chief of the military, the chief of the National Security Council, are both on record as having advised the government to not go ahead with this plan. What I can say is that they are amassing forces. They are calling up more reservists, I think about 20,000. They are moving many more enlisted men into the perimeter of Gaza and preparing to go in with armored vehicles. And for sure, they're going to indeed try to get the population that is not militants to go south to Deir al-Balach or further south. All of that is extremely messy. There is very little appetite in Israel for ending up administering more than 2 million Palestinians, many of whom are hostile. It'll be a very prolonged insurgency. They really don't want that, and there are very few illusions in Israel that they can ethnically cleanse the entire territory, or should. Where are they going to go? Egypt won't take them. So all this talk, I must emphasize, is fundamentally nonsense. It is basically about how to rid the Gazans and the Israelis of the presence of Hamas. Now, you might disagree with that and want Hamas. You say they were elected? I don't think so. I remember that election in 2006. That was 19 and a half years ago, and Hamas won not a majority, but a plurality because of divisions among the others in the legislative elections. They were never elected to run Gaza. There was no Gaza then. It was all of the Palestinian National Authority areas in the West Bank and Gaza, and it was a legislative election. The PA was the executive, and Hamas basically conducted a civil war and a military coup and threw them out of Gaza in 2007. And ever since then, there's been nothing but misery. You're right about the blockade, of course. But that blockade is not just by Israel, it's also by Egypt. And the reason was because they knew that whatever went in would be used not to help the people of Gaza, but to build rockets and dig tunnels and prepare for an invasion of Israel. That's precisely what happened, despite the blockade.
Okay.
Mainly, I think, through smuggling in the tunnels under the Egyptian border before the Egyptians got more serious. I have to underscore, it is an Israeli and Egyptian blockade. And there's a reason for it. Anyone who thinks that Hamas wanted to rule Gaza for the welfare of the Gazans is extremely naive. They wanted to use it as a base to attack Israel, and they did.
I think, though, if you speak to Palestinians, they're more concerned about the continuing Israeli occupation of certainly occupied East Jerusalem, West Bank, and its blockade on Gaza, whether it's also including the Egyptians. But just very quickly, Dan, because we're running out of time, the conversation on Israeli reservists, it's ongoing at the moment in Israel. What's being deliberated exactly? Because such a big operation would require thousands of Israeli reservists. Where is Israel in that conversation at the moment?
Well, as I say, to my knowledge, they plan to call up several tens of thousands of reservists. There have been reports of hundreds of thousands. I believe those to be unrealistic in a country of about 10 million people, a little bit more. There is no appetite in Israeli society for the call-ups of huge numbers of reservists, nor indeed for an escalation of the war. Polls show that over 70% of the people, and depending on how you define the terms, close to 80% of the people want the war to end, even if Hamas stays in power in Gaza. That doesn't mean they're happy with that outcome. That just means they agree with me that once the war ends, there are other ways to smoke out Hamas. Almost no one wants them to stay. And I have a secret for you. Almost no Gazan Palestinians want them to stay. This is something that should be very clear to the viewers of Al Jazeera. It is a true cataclysm that could end in a second if there were found a way to get rid of Hamas. You asked me about the discourse in Israel and the appetite and what they're going to do in the military plans. These things are largely secret, the military plans. The reports of 200,000 or 300,000 reservists were reports that were then denied, and I believe the denials because they're unrealistic. The actual official plans are not widely discussed, but it also doesn't take a genius or a huge cognoscenti of military strategy. They're going to go in there with armored vehicles and with commando units, and it's going to be extremely messy and very deadly on both sides. I sincerely hope it doesn't come to pass. Okay,
thank you very much, Dan Perry. We have run out of time, but always appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks. Thank you.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.